Dialogue.
Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on wadr.org. Welcome to NEWSLINK. Here are the top stories. Chiefs of Defense Staff at the ECOWAS Extraordinary Summit in Abuja resolved to protect democracy and all democratic institutions.
The task of restoring democratic governance in Niger is fraught with potential hurdles and complications. However, we cannot afford to be hamstrung by these challenges. Instead, we must confront them head-on, drawing upon our shared experiences, wisdom, and the strength of our collective resolve.
The Senegalese government addresses the press on recent activities in the country. Liberia's President George Weah calls for peace as the October 10 election approaches, and revolutionary discussions take center stage at the 4th edition of the Africa Philanthropy Conference.
And every time we organize it, we have new partners joining, which is why we are convinced that this is resonating with what people want to see happen on the continent.
Stay with us for details of these stories and more.
Here is Tawfiq Abdul Nasser with NEWSLINK.
Many thanks for joining us. Let's begin in Senegal as the government is addressing the press on recent activities in the country. Issues to be addressed include the surge in irregular migration and deaths of Senegalese youth on the sea attempting the Mediterranean route, and the recent political tension across the country, which resulted in violence in certain districts of Dakar. In Ziguinchor, 2 people died in confrontations when the news of the arrest of opposition politician Ousmane Sonko emerged, while in the Dakar suburb, 2 persons died in a fire incident when hooded individuals attacked and robbed passengers of a commercial bus. The passengers were trapped in the vehicle as others forced their way out due to a fire caused by Molotov cocktail thrown at the bus by the attackers. This is the first such an incident in which the Minister of Interior, Antoine Felix John, will be investigated by the state. Abuja, Nigeria's seat of government, has since the coup in Niger seen a beheave of activities, meetings and conferences over the safety and protection of the democratic institutions in the sub-region. On day 1 of the extraordinary summit of the ECOWAS Committee of Chiefs of Defense Staff, the security experts and stakeholders discussed strategies to address the recent coup d'etat in the Republic of Niger. Abdullahi Hassan has the rest of the details.
The extraordinary summit of the top military brass in Abuja attracted security and regional experts, as well as defense officials from ECOWAS member states. Members of the diplomatic community whose interests revolved around promoting democratic values and human rights issues were in attendance. Christopher Musa, Nigerian Chief of Defense Staff, insists on the regional army's resolve to restore stability and democracy.
The political instability in Niger is a source of grave concern for us all. It threatens our shared vision of a peaceful, secure, and prosperous West Africa, a vision that is impossible to achieve amidst political upheavals and disruptions to constitutional order. The task of restoring democratic governance in Niger is fraught with potential hurdles and complications. However, we cannot afford to be hamstrung by these challenges. Instead, we must confront them head-on, drawing upon our shared experiences, wisdom, and the strength of our collective resolve.
The ousting of democratically elected governments is a means to increase socio-economic problems and a wide window to right abuses. For countries in the Sahel, namely Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, the security and humanitarian crisis may be subjected to further deterioration should international partners suspend operations and aid support. In light of these concerns, Namdel Fattah Musa, ECOWAS Commissioner for Peace and Security, says,
in the past 3 years or so, there have been about 8-9 successful and unsuccessful coups in West Africa. In Sierra Leone, a number of military officers were arrested a few days ago for trying to cause mayhem. You see, so if we do not arrest this situation, West Africa is going to be the laughing stock of Africa and the world.
In the meantime, will the mediation in Niger between the ECOWAS delegation and the junta prevent an imminent military intervention, or will Niamey's Sahelian allies, including Bamako and Ouagadougou, run the race to the finish line with the CNSP? These are questions many say will have answers when the ECOWAS timer on Niger's junta stops ticking.
Abdullahi Hassan reporting there. In Mali, the position adopted by the transitional authorities on the situation in Niger is provoking reactions in the country. Earlier this week, Bamako and Ouagadougou warned ECOWAS against any intervention in the country they border. In the Malian capital, political parties and civil society organizations are divided on the issue. Imuradet brings more in this report by WADR's Bamako correspondent Aliyu Cham.
Once again, in Bamako, key actors in the political and civil space are divided over the stance of the transitional authorities on the Niger crisis. The African Party for Integration and Sovereignty, for its part, supports Mali's position. Boubacar Abokum is its chairman.
Today, Mali's decision to join forces with Burkina Faso is a good thing, and that's the logic of the response we need to bring to ECOWAS and UEMOA, because it means that Africans are beginning to understand that we need to be united, that we need to be together to face up to the same monster, which is the West.
Civil society organizations agree, but they condemn the seizure of power by force. Wahab Jakite is a member of civil society.
I approve of this decision because I see it as a deterrent to intervention, and on the other hand, I strongly condemn the sanctions taken against the people of Niger.
On the other hand, the opposition party to the transition, ACRT Faso Kawele, believes that the challenges facing the Sahel must be addressed. Issa Kaojim speaks.
For us, the important thing is to contribute to the solution and not to take a dangerous stance. The real problems facing these countries today are terrorism, bad governance, and the day-to-day problems of citizens who can't even find enough to eat.
The authorities from Mali and Burkina Faso have announced that they will withdraw from the West African Organization if it deploys troops in Niger, a major decision that has regional defense chiefs gathered in Abuja for a two-day meeting. The junta in Niamey has 3 days until the ultimatum by ECOWAS fades out.
Imuradet filed that report.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. NewsLink continues.
Now, President George Weah continues to accentuate his determination to ensure that Liberia's democratic credentials are jealously upheld through the conduct of elections that meet all standards of fairness, transparency, and credibility on October 10. In a special statement Wednesday at a session on promoting peaceful 2023 elections held with presidential candidates, Weah recalled how far Liberia has come democratically and in maintaining peace since the end of the Civil War. WADR's Darlington Popper in Monrovia reports.
During his speech, President Weah challenged presidential aspirants in the pending elections to put the interests of the country at the highest priority before, during, and after the electioneering processes. According to him, the October 10 polls present Liberians with a unique opportunity to consolidate their democracy and showcase the country's maturity in handling its democratic processes.
Our collective interest in the well-being of Liberia must always remain paramount, even as we pursue our individual political ambitions.
The chairperson of the Elections Commission, David Etta-Brown-Lassana, used the gathering to inform the presidential candidates that all necessary measures have been put in place to ensure a credible process.
The NEC remains committed to conducting the 10th October 2023 elections in a free, fair, and credible manner, as it has been the hallmark of this institution. We consider this forum as a wonderful opportunity for positive engagement, and we call on all of you leaders to play your role in ensuring that the electoral process progresses and concludes peacefully.
In remarks, the ambassador of ECOWAS accredited near Monrovia, Josephine Nkrumah, appealed to political leaders to be mindful of their utterances for the common good of the nation and its people.
I'd like to say leadership is course, everything else is effect. So what you do and what you say is what your partisans will follow. And I'm confident that the billboards that you've signed here, the gestures of peace and of one Liberia will trickle down to the ordinary citizen.
The event was held to honor the team building the confidence of presidential candidates in the working of the NEC and was organized by the National Elections Commission and its partners, including ECOWAS and UN Liberia. For NEWSLINK on West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Darlington Pogba in Monrovia.
And in Guinea, there are speculations of a new showdown between the Minister of Justice and the Guinean Bar Association. This is because the men in black robes do not seem to approve of the approach of the Minister of Justice, Alphonse Wright, to revise Law 014, which governs the legal profession in the country. When questioned on Wednesday, the spokesperson for the Bar Association suggested that their guild would not be under the tutelage of the executive. WADR's Conakry, Terno Alpha Ibrahim Abalde has more in this report voiced by Oge Obi Erika in our studios.
August 10 is the deadline set by the Minister of Justice, Alphonse Wright, for the Guinean Bar Association to submit the results of the preparatory work on the organization's reform. Many lawyers are, however, not happy with this injunction. In a letter sent to the Minister of Justice on Wednesday, the president of the bar questions the urgency of the reform as the lawyers do not intend to submit before the set deadline. Faya Gabriel Haba is the spokesman for the Bar Association.
We appreciated the fact that the Minister of Justice, Keeper of the Seals, gave us a deadline to submit our work to him. It was as if we were under his authority, whereas the Minister of Justice must not forget that Barrot is an independent institution and lawyers practice a liberal and independent profession. So as such, we are not under the authority of the Minister of Justice.
With the reform of Law L014 envisaged by Charlie Wright, the bar should henceforth be under the supervision of the executive. Gabriel Haba warns that this revision cannot be carried out without their consent.
We were surprised and indignant at the same time because any law contributing to the functioning and reorganization of the legal profession is first and foremost a matter for lawyers, and therefore any reform concerning Barrot applies to lawyers, and therefore lawyers should be involved in this work. To do so without lawyers would be to work against lawyers, and Barrot will never allow itself to be subjected to any public authority, and we will never work under pressure from anyone.
A member of the Office of the Minister of Justice tells us that Alphonse Wright will not bow to pressure regarding the reforms he wishes to undertake in the judicial sector.
A report about Terno Alpha Ibrahim Abalde in Conakry, voiced by Oge Obi Erika. You're listening to NEWSLINK on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM, Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Chiefs of Defense Staff at the ECOWAS Extraordinary Summit in Abuja resolve to protect democracy and all democratic institutions. The Senegalese government addresses the press on recent activities in the country. Liberia's President George Weah calls for peace as the October 10 election approaches, and revolutionary discussions take center stage as Senegal hosts the 4th edition of the Africa Philanthropy Conference. Still ahead is the press review, guest interview, and sports update. Stay with us.
You are listening to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal.
In Senegal, the 4th Africa Philanthropy Conference is underway, exploring the future of African philanthropy with a focus on people, power, policies, and practices. themed philanthropy at an inflection point, influential voices and key stakeholders gather to address societal issues, challenge cultural narratives, and discuss system changes. Co-hosted by Trust Africa and other leading organizations, the conference includes a panel discussion on African philanthropy meets European philanthropy to shape a sustainable future, held during the Filia Forum in Croatia. Ibrahim Assal, the executive director of Trust Africa, shares valuable insights on the conference and the future of philanthropy in Africa.
And every time we organize it, we have new partners joining, which is why we are convinced that this is resonating with what people want to see happen on the continent. New partners are coming on board. The numbers are increasing at every gathering we do. The diversity of the participation is increasing. The intensity and the depth of the debates, we believe, is also becoming greater. And we are seeing the changes. When we started, the big issue was data. Meanwhile, this center, CAPSI, and others also have been doing more research. Starting training programs. At this meeting now, from last year, we began organizing an academic conference on the eve of the main conference. And we had quite a few people in Johannesburg last year. This time around, we had up to 80-something people coming at this academic conference that we did at the Museum of Black Civilizations in Dakar yesterday and the day before. And the debates were extremely rich. A lot of the students who were there are master students of CAPSI and of other universities, doctoral students from Senegal and elsewhere, and of CAPSI as well. So we see the growth of the community and the growth of this initiative. And that's all part of the community building effort that we think is significant and ought to be done.
Ibrahim Assal is the executive director of Trust Africa.
This is the newspaper review. Stay on top of the news. Get the most important stories with added insight and concise review.
This is the newspaper review.
Atiwin and Bella Lawson in Accra joins us now with the major headlines from the Ghanaian dailies.
Let's start with the headlines in the Daily Graphic newspaper. The screaming headline, GCB Bank at 70, testament of banking leadership, according to the Bank of Ghana. Then we have some banner headlines. IMF bailout, government meets second release conditions, AU approves Ghana conference. Let's head over to the Ghanaian Times newspaper. The screaming headline, pay us reparations for atrocities. President demands, urges Africa to resist any form of enslavement and oppression. Then some banner headlines. University of Cape Coast honors Dr. Prempe and 6 others for their contribution to humanity. And then the final banner headline, Giba sues ministry and company for unilaterally charging fees. So those are the headlines in the Ghanaian Times newspaper. From there, let's go to the Daily Guide newspaper. The screaming headline, 7 grabbed in Cecilia Dapa's $1 million stolen cash. Attorney General orders a probe. Then some banner headlines. You can't impose candidate on the MPP. That's according to President Nana Akufo-Addo. And Giba sues Attorney General and KNET over DTT platform. Also, the final banner headline, Nana pushes for prioritization of women and children. Let's now bring you some headlines in the Business Analyst newspaper. The screaming headline, fallout from Public Accounts Committee sitting, Cocoa Board sets record straight on forensic audit report of the Cocoa Roads project. Some banner headlines, EC boss joins ECOWAS AU pre-electoral fact-finding mission for Liberia. And then another banner headline, Maslock fails to recover 304.3 million Ghana cedi loans to customers, Auditor General report reveals. Then another banner headline, GIMPA PMI Ghana sign MOU to facilitate academia and industry transition. And then GIPC paid 244,800 Ghana cedis to board members without finance minister's approval. That's a story to look at. And then we have the Business Finder newspaper. The screaming headline, GCB Bank to support Ghanaian businesses to explore beyond our shores. Then some banner headlines: Ghana to end use of fossil fuel cars by 2070, and Solar Africa merger to unlock sustainable access to power. So those are the headlines in the Business Finder newspaper. Wrapping up our newspaper review for today, my name is Atiewin Imbila Lawson from Accra, Ghana. Back to you in the studio.
Politics,
analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is The Guest.
Following the recent coup in Niger, there has been a flurry of reactions from various international, continental, regional, and non-governmental organizations, all urging for the restoration of constitutional order in the country. The regional body ECOWAS is currently holding a meeting in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, in a determined effort to find a resolution to the ongoing crisis. During its gathering, an ultimatum has been issued to the junta leader, Abdurrahman Chani, which elapses in 3 days to comply or face sanctions. Amidst the unfolding situation, questions have risen regarding the role of civil society organizations and non-governmental organizations in this coup-affected state. Critics argue that despite the presence of numerous CSOs, little progress has been made in addressing the issues. On the other hand, some contend that since civilian rule has proven to be ineffective on the continent, military governance should take a more prominent role. Answering these questions is our guest, MacDonald Lowaneka, a continental governance expert.
You know, for some time now, it seemed as if progress was being made on the continent, that men in military fatigues were beginning to stay in the barracks. But unfortunately, it seems military coups are beginning to recur, and not just in West Africa and the countries that you have mentioned. Further down south in Lesotho, we have seen instances of that over the course of the last 5 to 10 years. In Zimbabwe, we saw the illegal change of leadership in 2017 through a military coup. And in that region, military coups were nowhere to be found. So it really is a disturbing and worrying situation that is developing and continuing to develop on the continent. But again, you know, in the spirit of positive narrative building, while we have these terrible things happening, countries that you have mentioned, here in Senegal where we are, we have seen recent examples of people power, of citizens power, of democratic consolidation. So those kinds of examples are also ones that we need to shine a light on, because they are inspirational, because they encourage other young people in different parts of the continent that if they speak up, they indeed can be heard and can be able to stop power in its track, even in its pursuit of accruing even more power. This is not to say that young people in Burkina Faso, in Mali, should throw themselves in front of guns, but it is about institution building, it is about building culture. And that in itself is a very patient process, but a process that we must not give up on and continue to work.
Right. So some have argued that looking at how economic hardship has taken over the continent, because you see all our leaders going to the West begging for money, and this is the place that history has told us that they came to force our forefathers back to their continent illegally. So many have argued that looking at how the situation is now, they think military government is what fits Africa, especially looking at how Burkina Faso has asked France to leave its territory. Mali also did the same. And then now Niger is also calling for them to be out. Are you of the same view? Do you think the continent needs a military government instead of a civilian?
Well, I'm unequivocally opposed to any kinds of military regimes. I believe that people need to be able to exercise the right to choose who governs them, and they need to do so democratically. There is no place in modern society for violent takeover politics of the kind that we're seeing in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and the kind of chaos that we're seeing in Sudan, for instance. There's no place in modern society for those things. And we cannot exonerate those particular instances simply because because those presiding over these military regimes may be placating us and saying some things which are revolutionary or that we like to hear. At the end of the day, it is about establishing a way in which people need to be able to ascend to power. They say that if you live by the sword, you die by the sword, but they also say an eye for an eye makes the world go blind.
Looking at the continent, and as far as governance is concerned, organizations like yours have emerged in the continent. We have a lot of civil society organizations calling for accountability, because you are also calling for accountability. Why do you think that despite all these numerous organizations, the problems still persist? Why do you think so?
Yeah, no, that's a very tough one. You're almost suggesting that we are wasting our time, and I don't think that is correct. When we begin to look at the kind of issues that we're dealing with, issues of good governance, issues of getting rid of corruption, these are not things that you can do in a day's work. These are things that call for a shift in norms and values, and shifting norms and values or behavioral change takes time. Part of the reason why we've been unsuccessful in the past as civil society in achieving the goals that we set out to do, like you have rightfully put it, is because we are impatient. We don't take the time to build at community level. We don't take the time to build relationships of trust that can lead to shifts in norms and values of people. We are always looking for the quick result at the end of the day, and what it then puts us in is a mode where we try to mobilize people around a particular issue rather than to organize people in ways that can ensure that at the end of the day they are able to stand up in a resilient fashion on the issues that matter to them.
Mark Donald Lowaneka is a continental governance expert. And in sports, Morocco have secured a place in the round of 16 of the FIFA Women's World Cup after a 1-0 win against Colombia. A first rebound goal by forward Lamari was enough to secure the win and book qualification to the next round in their maiden FIFA World Cup. Morocco finished second behind group winners Colombia and ahead of Guarani, who drew with Korea. Morocco joined Nigeria and South Africa in the round of 16. And that's it for sports. We have come to the end of this edition of NewsLink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to our listeners in the Gambia via Hot 104.3 FM and Numi FM 94.0 Banjul. In Liberia via Alternative Viewed Radio 98.9 FM Lofa County. We also thank our listeners in Ghana on Radio Pod 95.1 Savannah region and on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi. Christian Mukidi has been on the console, and Mustafa Sek has been streaming live on YouTube and Facebook. Do interact with us via social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram at WADR News, and on Facebook, West Africa Democracy Radio English Service. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is a rebroadcast of our environment program, Enviroscope, with Abdullahi Hassan. I am Tawfiq Abdul Nasir. Good afternoon.
News, talk, music, get it all 24 hours on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9.